When you take a look at a laptop, your first assumption is that I really can't do much in terms of expandability, but that's not true. You can actually do a lot with laptops. Now, the dangerous part to this is that you're going to have to grab a screwdriver and you're going to have to open up the laptop itself to look at some of the different types of expansion slots that are inside. So what I've done is I've got two laptops here in front of me and I've already got the screws ready to go. Let's take a look inside the laptops. All right, so I'm going to open up. These are all Dell laptops. Well, I like Dell. What can I say? All right, let's take a look inside here. First of all, this is just a good old SATA hard drive. I've taken the screws out already, but this is just a regular 2.5-inch SATA hard drive. Again, I took out a couple of screws, but that's all I have to do, and it comes right in or out. There's nothing special about that. The CPU underneath the fan there. CPU underneath right here, and then this is the heat sink. Here's the fan blowing the air out. Here is regular SO DIMMs. One of the things that people do is a lot of times like they will go to Dell to buy special Dell memory, and you don't really need to do that. All of these different types of devices are super standardized. You can go just anywhere and pick these up. There we go. Now, in terms of expansion slots, I want to show you this right here. Give me a minute to get this guy off. This is actually a wireless network card. All right, let me pull this guy out. This is mini PCIe. Now, this in particular in my hands right here is a wireless NIC, but there's actually a second slot. Let me turn this and see if you can see that there are two PCI Express slots, mini PCI Express slots in here. Now, I can put this in either place. What's interesting, you'll see it says WLAN and WPAN. That's because Dell wants you to put the wireless LAN card here, and WPAN is actually a Bluetooth radio, and which I don't have in this particular laptop, but I could easily put one in and pick one of these mini PCI Express Bluetooth radios up for next to nothing and plug it in. Now, what I want to do is let's take this and move over to the other system real quick. Oh, that's a little dusty. Okay. Now, if you take a look right here, you'll notice that this is another mini PCI Express card right here. In fact, it's pretty much an identical card. But there's another connector. Let me turn this. Right here. You can see you could actually plug that in right there if you wanted to. So in terms of interchangeability, things like 2.5-inch drives, SO DIMMs, and mini PCI Express are just some of the tools that we can use that allow for really wild amounts of expandability. Now, while we're looking at this, I want to show you one more thing. I'll put that back in a minute. What I want you to look at are these connectors right here. Now, you'll notice these connectors are identical, and there's a reason for that. What you're looking at here these are what are known as docking stations. It's actually a little box that I can slide my computer into, and it will give me full-blown video, an wired Ethernet connection, PS2 ports for mice or keyboards. So it's a full-blown docking station, but I have to have a proprietary connector. So if I want to add even more expandability, I can buy a Dell docking station for certain Dell laptops, and I get a lot more extra connectors. Now, there's an alternative to a docking station. Keep in mind, docking stations are proprietary to particular makes and models of laptops. But if you want, you can get something called a port replicator. A port replicator is based exclusively on USB ports. So it's basically, it kind of looks like a docking station, but you just plug one of your USB connectors into the laptop, and then it's like a big USB hub, so you can plug in mice and all kinds of USB stuff. The downside to a port replicator is because it's USB, it's kind of hard to plug a big monitor or something like that, which is very easy to do with a docking station. But the nice thing about a port replicator is that you just buy a port replicator, it works for pretty much any computer. All right, now there's one more form of expansion I want to show you, and it has to do with these guys here. a long time ago, they discovered that the idea of having the ability to have a generic card that you can snap in would be a good thing. If I were, trust me, when I look at the end of these cards, I've got an eSATA, I've got a FireWire, I've got a USB, and I have a wireless NIC using two different types of technologies. Let's talk about all of these technologies in detail. Now, basically, I have a litany of these expansion cards going from left to right, from oldest to newest. So let's talk about these two in particular. The original type of expansion bus in a card was known as PCMCIA, which we jokingly always said meant PC makers create idiotic acronyms. But the problem with PCMCIA, there was nothing wrong with it. It was great because it was the only thing that was out there at the time. It was a 16-bit type of connector, and it would have these little tiny connectors like this, and they worked fine. There was nothing wrong with it. A few years later, they came out with PC Card. PC Card's always distinct because it has these little metal things on the end. These are a full-blown 32-bit connector. And for years, this is the way you did it, was these two types of connectors. Now, the nice part is that if you've got, I've got one right here. So we're going to just slide this guy in like that. There's no drivers to install or anything. You just push it in and it works. It's a beautiful thing. The interesting point is that when PCMCIA came out, you would have usually two of these stacked one on top of each other. And so they're all the same width, but you would have different thicknesses of cards. You would have a very, very thin card called a Type 1. This is a Type 2 card, and then there was a big thick card called a Type 3 card. And so if you had these double stacked slots, they were usually Type 2, so if you could plug in exactly one Type 3 card, or two Type 2s, or two Type 1s. And they will ask you that on the A+, so make sure you know that Type 3 is the thickest, Type 2 is the middle one, and Type 1 is the skinny one. There was nothing wrong with PCMCIA other than the fact that even at 32-bit with PC Card, it was still kind of slow. And that's where we moved into what we call express cards. Express cards come in two different thicknesses. This is a 34 millimeter, and this is a 54 millimeter. To be technically correct, I should say widths, because they're all the same thicknesses. There is no Type 1, Type 2, or Type 3 with PC cards. So it's just so cool that my laptop here has both of these connectors. Now, what I want you to see here, this is a PC card connector in here, so this one goes in just fine, but equally, this one works just as well too. So they're completely interchangeable. All right, now this is a big no-no. This is a regular PC card, and this is an express card slot. This isn't going to work. In fact, if you push too hard, you'll break stuff. They're not interchangeable. So these slots are one type of slot, and these slots are another type of slot. And ne'er the twain shall meet. So you really can do a lot of expandability with laptops. Not only do we have very standardized slots for internal devices, we have things like docking stations and port replicators for sliding our computers in for big monitors and full-size mice and stuff like that. And then we even have things like PC Card and Express Card for those laptops that have those types of slots. Now I do want to make one mention. This is not on the A+, but need to be aware of that. And that is the people who make these cards, their association about it around 2011, they kind of broke up, and they're now part of the USB Implementers Forum. The word on the street is that PC Card and Express Card, well, they're probably not going to be expanded upon anymore. And with a laptop, if you're going to be doing any expansion, you're probably just going to be using USB.